pasuk of Al Nosik Brei Mitzrayim, where Yaakov makes a request to his son Yosef, please, I don't want to be buried in Egypt. So Rashi cites three reasons, which is cited in the Midrash. Why doesn't he want to be buried in Egypt? One of them is because ultimately there's going to be Makas Kinin. One of the plagues was lice, and the lice will crawl under his body. Another reason is he was concerned that he would be deified. Yaakov, being that special person, when he came to Mitzrayim, the famine ceased. Due to the bracha which he had given Paro, whenever Paro would go down to the Nilos, to the Nile, the water would rise up and irrigate the land. And the third reason is because at the time of Tchias HaMeisim, being buried in Egypt would be very painful because he would be resurrected, and resurrection takes place in Eretz Yisrael, and he'd have to roll under the ground through various caves and underground passages, which is painful. These are the three reasons Rashi cites from the Midrash why he didn't want to be buried in Egypt. However, the Midrash Tanchuma offers a fourth reason. The reason is, the Midrash says, we find, based on a posuk in Yecheskel, that Egypt are compared to chamorim, to donkeys. Yecheskel Navi says, B'sar chamorim b'soram, that the Egyptians, their flesh is like the flesh of the donkeys. And Yaakov Avinu is compared to the sheep, because the pasuk says, Se Pezuri Yisrael. And the Torah tells us that if you have the firstborn, a donkey, what does the Torah tells us? The chamor is tifte b'sech, that the chamor, you redeem it with the sheep, and you give the sheep to the Kohen, and the owner retains the donkey. I don't want to be the redemption for the chamor. Egypt is the chamor, I am the seh. By me being buried there, I'll be a redemption for the chamor. And that I don't want to be. What does this mean? Being buried there will be a redemption for chamor. How does this exactly, what relevance does this have to pigeon pet the chamor? The sheep removes the status of the chamor, changes its status, which permits it to the owner to benefit from it. The Maral writes that why are the Egyptians compared to chamorim? The word chamor comes from the word chomer. Chon means material. Of all the 70 root nations, the nation which had the least relevance to spirituality was Mitzrayim, Egypt. So chamor, they're depicted as the donkey, their essence there's a greater intensity of physicality to the Egyptian than any other nation. As a result of that, because they're almost devoid of spirituality, we find that all the ills of spirituality are found in Egypt. Witchcraft, incest, adultery, idolatry. This was all Egypt because there was a void, there was a vacuum of spirituality. Besides of Midrash, we find that there's a pasuk that says Hashem extracts or min achoshech, light from darkness, tor bitomei, pure from impure. How could you extract light from darkness? How could you extract something that's pure from something which is impure? So the Medrash says, what is an example of or min achoshech? Avram be Terach. Terach himself was evil, and yet he merited to have a son like Avram. Avram was extracted, was the Or Ben HaChoshech. This is Or Ben HaChoshech. So Maral establishes a principle that we find that the greater the void, in terms of the positive, the result of that setting, of that context, the result has a greater level of spirituality. And the reason why HaKadosh Baruch Hu chose us to go to Mitzrayim, that because there was a total void and vacuum of spirituality there, us being there, which is referred to as the Kurat Barzel, when we came out, we had the greatest potential to rise to the 49th level of Tara, of purity. So wherever there's a void, the greater the void, the greater is the outgrowth of that location. So therefore Hashem chose Egypt because they're the Chamorim. And this is the equivalent to Or Ben Achoshech. This is the Maral. Now, if Yaakov would be buried in Egypt and he would be deified, how would the Egyptians deify Yaakov? Yaakov was known as a spiritual person. He's a person who was removed from physicality. So they would emulate, if they want this power to respond to their supplications, they would emulate who he was. If they emulate Yaakov, what are they doing? They're weaning themselves from the material. They become less chomer. If they're less chomer, that means Klal Yisrael are going to be a less of a Klal Yisrael. The context of location becomes less of a context to ultimately generate the most advanced level of Kedusha. As a result of, Yaakov says, I don't want to be buried there. Because if I am buried there, I'm the Seh. I'll be the redemption for the Chamor. As it says, Chamor Tivte B'Seh, because this will cause them to be elevated. Because due to their way they will serve me and worship me, they're going to emulate my ways, they'll be elevated. If they're elevated, Klaus is going to be a lesser Klaus. So therefore, I'll not take B'Rei Mitzrayim. I don't want to be buried there. They should remain at their lesser level, so my descendants should achieve the utmost.